I kept telling myself I was fine, because when I tried to convince myself I was fine, I was able to put to the back of my mind the fact that I was actually bored and tired. I didn't know why every day was just feeling the same. Getting to the point in life where you don't really know what you're doing every day isn't the best position to be in. Asking yourself that question, why am I even doing this? That's not a good mental state to be in life as well. And I'd sit after work and just look around the place I was living in, thinking that this isn't perfect. I was using 50% of my current salary just to pay for the mortgage, and wondering why I was even okay living in a place like that. But I always told myself I was fine, telling myself I should be grateful that at least I had a place to live and a car to drive, and a job that was able to pay to me to exist. That was about it though. I could only exist, and nothing else seemed to change or get better. I think this happens to so many people, and it's how these people cope with these feelings that will decide what they're going to go on and to do. I always felt like I wanted to do something. I just never knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to be the big shot at work, who was paid the big bucks, who arrived in a convertible car to work, and who left work in the evenings, going to a nice restaurant and a bar afterwards before returning home. That wasn't me though. I wasn't paid enough to be able to do that, and when I left work, all I could do was return home to live a boring existence. Living in my dreams was what I had to do. That was no way to live, but I'd been doing that for years, and it got to the point where I didn't want to do it anymore. The question was, how did I make sure I didn't need to do it anymore? It was difficult to have any ideas, because every idea that I had involved needing money. I didn't have any money. I had equity in the place I was living in, but that was it. And then you have to get to that special level of desperation before you consider selling your only asset in search of a better life. The Philippines was on my radar for a number of years. A guy at work was married to a Filipina. He brought her to live in the States. I hadn't seen her many times, just at the twice yearly work events that we were forced to attend. He came along with his wife, and he seemed to be in a relationship that was better than all the other relationships I saw around me. The other guys at work who were married to women from home seemed to be doing things differently than he was. It seemed to be that she was his wife, and while he was her husband, that played a lesser amount of importance to the fact because she was his wife. I don't really know if that makes sense, but that's how I thought about things. I guess I was extremely bitter because one of the reasons I was struggling so much at the time was because I lost a lot of money to my ex-wife, who was from the same town as I was. I became extremely angry with the world when I lost all that to her, and it made me understand that relationships aren't meant to be like that. I wanted something where I was in charge, yet not in a bad way, just in a way where if she decided she didn't want to stay with you anymore, she wouldn't get anything. Simple as that. So I completely gave up on the thought of love at home, and I was starting to think that perhaps I should go to the Philippines, get married, and bring my wife to live with me in America. I missed company so badly, and the more I thought about this, the more I started to think that that would be what I would do. What would be the harm in flying to the Philippines to see if I could find someone to make my life better? It took so many years thinking about it before actually doing it. Why it took me so long, I will never know, but it did. Years and years thinking, do it, do it, do it. Then it's only a split-second decision that mean all those years thinking about it were completely wasted. One evening, I returned from work, and I was at breaking point. So, the Philippines was it then. I was going to see if I could get my life back. That's the best way to describe it. I wanted to get my life back, get it back on track, and I couldn't do that if I didn't at least try something new and exciting. When it was finally confirmed that I was going to the Philippines, it was really strange, because I felt almost as if a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I was always thinking about what to do, what was right, and what was the right thing to do, and it was like I was putting myself under a lot of pressure because I wasn't making any progress. But as soon as I was going, I loosened up a lot. I stopped bothering as much about the things that I didn't really like very much, about where I was from and where I had to live and the job I had to do. They didn't seem to matter as much anymore because I was a guy who was prepared to go and look at something different. I was taking the first step to changing my life, and it was a very liberating feeling. It was a feeling that was better than I ever thought it would have been, and a feeling that I simply am unable to describe accurately enough unless you've been in a similar position. When I got the plane tickets arranged, they were for 6 weeks' time, so I had a lot of time to think about it and imagine what it was going to be like. I actually enjoyed that a lot, imagining what it was going to be like and thinking about what I was going to do when I was there. I spoke to that guy at work about it. He went every single year for his yearly vacation with his wife. He always talked about that's where they were going to retire. She was working as well at a local shop, so they were both wanting to live in the Philippines, but working in the States to get money to make that a reality. He gave me a lot of pointers and tips about things I should be careful of and things I shouldn't do. Some of the things he told me not to do, I did really want to try anyway. So I just told him no way would I do that, but deep down I knew I would. I was going for a whole month. It was going to be a learning curve and a life experience that I actually felt like I deserved. I needed it as well, but I deserved something exciting. The first days after landing in Manila were about keeping it as simply as I could. I didn't want to get lost in my own head or get carried away with the sensory overload that I was welcomed with. I got myself a local sim straight away, one of the first things I did, and I went to all the different areas of the city that I'd read about, just taking it all in. I knew that there were things in the Philippines that many people liked, such as the nightlife, and I was interested to see what that was like. The first few days, though, I didn't go into any sort of nightlife establishments, but it was on my 4th day that I went to P. Burgos Street, and I went in every single one of the bars there. Just one beer in each, seeing what it was all about. And that's when you enter a world like no other world you've ever seen. Being approached by girls, playing pool, walking not too far away for great food. It was a very good night that I will remember fondly forever. Nothing happened, but it was one of those moments in life where you understand that the sort of things that happen in your dreams, that you don't think are even real, are actually real in some countries. And it opens the world to you in a way that you never felt possible until then. I'd never been to Asia before. The furthest I'd ever been was down to Colombia, but I went with some buddies and I quickly learned that solo travelling, although I had a great time with my buddies, solo travelling is a lot better because you can do what you want when you want to do it. And you don't have to feel shy or embarrassed to want to do something that your buddies might not want to do or laugh at you for wanting to do. I had a great time in Manila, stayed there for a total of 6 days, and it was the first time that the idea I was getting from the Philippines wasn't to meet someone and take them home with me, it was for me to somehow move there instead. The thought of going back to the States after experiencing this wasn't a fun thought at all. I could see someone and stay in the Philippines, then start thinking about, well, where am I going to get money from to do this? Thinking all kinds of things. But in the moment, I just wished that it hadn't taken me nearly 4 years to come to the decision to go there. I should have just gone when the first thought arrived, because it would have been better if I did it before. But you can't regret and change what you did. Based on how much I enjoyed the nightlife in Manila, I decided to go next to Angeles City. As soon as I arrived there, I felt that place just was everything I longed for. I had never been anywhere as fantastic as Angeles City before. I get that it is a little rough around the edges, but I wasn't bothered about that. I was more bothered about the atmosphere that you got when you were there, the feelings you got when you were walking down Red Street in the middle of night or in the middle of the day. And the really great hotel I stayed at that had security guards in front of it. It was amazing. Did they actually need these security guards? I hadn't seen anything dangerous happening, but it was just the feeling that you got. I fell in love with that town, and I still love that town to this day. It was a place that some people don't like, and I suppose I have to understand that, because of what it's known for. But what it was known for was what I wanted to be there for, and I was quickly drawn into the nightlife scene, which also turned out to be the day life scene as well, because the bars were open all day. I had plans to go to one of the islands. I didn't know which one I was going to go to, but as soon as I arrived in Angeles City, I decided to just have the remainder of my time there. It was such a wonderful experience, and I will admit to meeting a local Filipina on my third day there who was going to play a big part in my life moving forwards. She was working in a bar about 1/4 of the way down Red Street. I was just there at 1 o'clock in the daytime having a beer, and I just had to talk to her. One thing leads to another, and she's staying with me for the rest of my time there. I found out she was from Leyte. I never heard of that place before, but apparently it was an island further down south. She was 21, which was a lot younger than I was, but it didn't seem to be an issue for her. My friend's wife was 15 years younger than him, and they never had any problems, so what's an extra 15 years on top of that? I didn't think it was too much. During our first days together, she told me about her town and her parents and a cousin who came and went, and how she sent money when she could. I told her about the States and work and how I was hoping to meet someone in the Philippines and take them back to the States with me. But now, how I was hoping to move to the Philippines instead, because I liked it so much. I talked about how I just wanted a smaller life that felt more like it belonged to me as opposed to the people I worked for, and I didn't want to slave away at the same job every day that I didn't like. She'd been staying with me for only a week when she asked me if I wanted to see her province. I didn't quite know how to react because it was my plan just to stay in Angeles City for a while because there were only 2 weeks left until I needed to leave. It felt like it would be a long way to go and then to come back again, and the fact that I didn't really know her that well, I just said, well, next time. I need to go back to the States first, but maybe next time I'd love to. She said okay, and we just got on with the rest of my vacation there. By the end of it, she was the reason that I'd already decided that I needed to sell everything and move to the Philippines. I didn't have any money, but I had a car, equity in my place, and I was thinking about what else I could sell. I already made up my mind that I wanted to be in the Philippines, and I wanted to be with her. That's all that mattered now, and I said to her, how about you go to Leyte, I go to the States, I get everything ready, and as soon as I can, I will go and meet you there. How does that sound? She said she needed to work and she didn't have enough money to do that, but I really wanted her to do it because I didn't want her to go back to work. I said that I would give her $1,000 and that should be enough for a few months, and then she said okay. So I gave her the money and we parted ways. I got the bus from Angeles to Manila Airport and flew home, and she said she would go to Leyte. A very long time later, I'm back at home, and the feelings that I want to be in the Philippines are even stronger as soon as I walk through the front door. I called her, she was in Leyte, and was able to prove it, which was good, and I just put everything into action to get rid of everything as quickly as I could. It was 4 difficult months. I did send her another $1,000 after 2 months, just to say that I'm coming soon and please wait, and I was working at the same time as selling everything. But when 4 months was up, I had absolutely nothing left, and money in the bank that should cover me for the Philippines for a long time. I did know that I would need to pick up work online. I knew people that did that, so that was something I felt I would do when the time was right. But the first thing was to just solidify the relationship and start enjoying life for the first time. That's the thing. When you start to enjoy yourself, the thought of not enjoying yourself anymore is a thought that you don't want to have. And I enjoyed myself so much when I was with her in the Philippines that that's all that mattered. That's all I thought about. And I was happy to sell everything I had just to have that feeling again. I flew to Manila and then I made my way to Leyte. And we just stayed in the main town for a few days together, just catching up because it had been 4 months since we'd seen each other. I immediately felt like I made the right decision as soon as I saw her again. It was incredible to be there with her, and it was going to be the start of a new chapter of my life. Cash-wise, I probably had $150,000, which is what I could raise from selling everything. So I thought that was an absolute fortune. Well, for me it was. We hadn't talked about where we were going to live, and while she showed me around Leyte, she never took me to meet her family. We both thought that that was too soon, but we did decide after we'd spent a week looking around there that we would go back to Angeles City. I really loved it there, and it was more affordable than Manila. So we went there and just rented a place on a month-by-month basis and just took things as they came. I wasn't spending a lot of money. I guess $1,000 a month, and that was giving us a great time together. We were still able to go out and do things. We were still able to have a proper life. And it was just amazing to have those first few months being somewhere so different, doing something so different, and starting to completely forget about my old life and how bad it used to be. The life I wanted to escape from so badly, I'd finally done it. And here I was, having the time of my life, with an incredible girl by my side. I felt like I was on top of the world and like nothing could go wrong. It can't have been, though, more than 3 months when we decided to get married. We went to Manila to do that and spent some time in BGC. I spent a bit more money that month, or for the whole month that we were in Manila. We stayed 2 months there, and it was just a way to get our relationship solidified in a way to be comfortable together. That was when we first started talking about moving to Leyte to live there. Because we were married, we did need to go and visit and get me introduced to the family, and we started talking about having our own place. I could build a very small house, $30,000 or $40,000. We wouldn't need to pay rent, and we could have a great time together. We left for Leyte not long after we were married, and that was the first time I was introduced to her family. They were amazing people. I felt very fortunate to have been able to meet them, and I felt like because I was married, I was part of the family now. I thought I was part of the family, and they were part of my family, and that's how it would be at home as well. That's what I was thinking about. But when we were there, the idea of living there started to feel even more appealing. It started feeling like this could be the best thing for us to do, and we even started looking for land that we could build a house on. I wasn't planning on spending a lot of money. There should have been no more than $40,000 for the land and the house, and that would have still given me a lot of money left, and then I could start working online. This is what I was thinking. We found a great plot of land for sale. It was only a very small piece, and it wasn't expensive. $6,000, so we agreed to buy it. We quickly put up a very small temporary construction that was suitable for us to live in while the main house was being built. It cost about $2,000. But before we knew it, work was starting on the house, and then it had stopped because it was ready. It was amazing when it was built because here we were, living in the Philippines, in Leyte, with an amazing house close to the beach. It had cost $40,000, so I couldn't believe just how amazing it was. It was only a 5-minute walk to the ocean, surrounded by lots of other houses, but most of them were not to the same kind of standards. But it was ours. We were married, and there I was thinking back to before I'd even been to the Philippines, what my life used to be like, and shivering at the thought of just how bad it was. Now things were amazing, and I thought they were going to continue getting better and better. Then things started to happen that I couldn't quite explain to start with, things that I never expected. There were visits from people that I thought nothing of at the time. I think about now all the time because I can't help it. For example, a man at a gate who waited before he came in. Another who didn't look at me when he talked. A couple of names I heard once and then heard again, like I should have remembered them. And when I asked her about it, all she said was it was nothing or something to do with a family business and we didn't need to worry. I let it be. I wasn't trying to be the guy who turned every question into some form of argument, and because I didn't really know what was going on either. I didn't have enough information at hand to accurately know what the situation was at that moment in time. That was until the first paper came, a folded piece of paper with a stamp on it and a date and a number. It was just handed over the gate by a guy who didn't tell me his name. I gave it to her because what it said didn't really make sense to me. And she just said it was about a line on a map. Something was put in the wrong place a long time ago and it was going to be corrected when the right person was back. She told me not to worry, and I didn't because I didn't know that I should be worrying about it. It seemed to be a very innocent thing the way she explained it. A week later, there was another paper, and this one had a name on it that I didn't recognize and a case number. And I tried to look at it and understand, but the problem was I didn't understand it. And I asked her again. She just said it was an old thing that didn't concern us. And I left it again until 2 days later, when in the morning another man came to the gate and handed her another piece of paper. When I read it after she did, I understood enough to know it wasn't about a line on a map. It was about a claim to the land itself that the house was built on. I asked her if she knew anything about this before we built, and she said no. And I wanted to stop there. I wanted to make that the end of it because the other choice was to say that I built a house on land that my wife knew had a problem. We went into the town and spent days in different offices, sitting and moving from one window to the next, handing over copies, paying fees, and waiting to hear her name called. I didn't know what was going on when they were talking about it. I heard dates, and some of those were older than her. Some of them were older than me, and it was crazy to think. We did it again. Next week and weeks go by, and it's starting to become apparent that we were having problems with the land. It was strange this was only coming up now. Perhaps because we'd already built a house and it was seen as being more valuable now than it was before. I'll never really understand, but it was very stressful, especially because up until that happened, everything seemed to be going so well. I asked her again, "Did you know before we built?" And she looked at me and she just had to say yes. She knew there was an old problem that people said would never really be a problem. She didn't tell me because she thought it would go away, and she thought if she told me, I would say no and leave. I really couldn't believe that something that seemed so small could turn into something so big. We bought the land. Yes, it was hers, yes. Yet there were claims going back that meant that the person we bought it from didn't have the original claim. That was how it was put to me, yet I couldn't really get to the bottom of what was going on. But it did seem that someone else had a claim to the land, and if that was confirmed, then not only would we lose the land, we'd lose the house that was built on it as well. That was when it started to become scary. It was just a waiting game, and when we finally learned the truth, it was shocking. The old claim had become confirmed, everything else done since then was void, and the land and the house were no longer ours. We had to leave. We had no choice but to leave, and all that money that was sunk into it was now gone. It was heartbreaking because I was just starting to enjoy life for the first time. I was where I wanted to be. I had an incredible wife. Yet she knew that there were slight problems with the land, but was advised that it wouldn't be an issue. She never told me about these problems because if she had, I wouldn't have agreed to buy it in the first place. But it was difficult to know what to do, because on the one hand I wanted to stay with my wife because I loved her and I was happy, yet on the other hand I felt like it was her fault that we lost all this, because all she needed to do was tell me that there was an issue with it, and I wouldn't have done what I did. We could have got different land, but it was too late to have all these thoughts and worries because it was already gone. We couldn't do anything about it, and it was just that realization that no matter what I did, no matter how hard I thought about coming up with a solution, there was nothing we could do. I suggested we buy the land from this person who had the correct claim. It was only worth $6,000 the land, but when we offered that, they said no way, they wanted so much more because it had a house on it. But that was the house I built, so we couldn't win. Completely writing that off was probably the worst day of my life. What made it even worse was the fact that I was so happy until that happened, and now we don't have our place anymore, and I don't have that money anymore, and the money I've got left, while still more than half of what I came with, was starting to feel like not enough. I would need to pay rent again, I'd need to do more things, and we'd need to struggle again, but I didn't know what else to do. The question, though, was what were we going to do? I chose to give my wife the benefit of the doubt. If she genuinely didn't think it was a real problem, perhaps that's why she didn't tell me. Perhaps she didn't think she was keeping secrets, but I didn't want to be anywhere close to Leyte anymore. The thought of staying there and having to see the house that I built, that I couldn't live in anymore, were thoughts that were enough to drive me insane. So I spoke to my wife and we just decided we would go to Angeles City and rent somewhere up there and completely forget about living in Leyte. That's what we did. We left Leyte, and while we were able to remove everything that wasn't fixed inside the house, I wanted to sell it. But I found out that we actually gave most of that to her family instead. That was her idea. I didn't want to do it, but what was I meant to do? I could have only got a little bit, so I just gave it to them. Back in Angeles City, we did find a place to rent, and I'm just wanting to be in the Philippines, and I'm trying to forget about what happened. I'm looking for work online because I know I can't stay forever without that, and I'm picking things up here and there. But I might only be making an extra 100 here, 50 there, or 200 there. And although it was some money, my money was still going down in terms of savings. One of the biggest problems, though, is that in Angeles City, my wife feels to be so deflated because of what happened with the house. While I felt this was far worse for me than it was for her, because I was the one who paid for it, she seemed to be reacting even worse than I was. I mean, it took me 2 or 3 months to get over it, yet she still wasn't over it. Even then, I didn't know what to do. 2 or 3 months for her wasn't enough. She was still visibly upset, and how different it was for her, I don't know. I tried my best to bring her around and make her forget about it, and gradually she was coming around, but it was difficult. Not long after, I actually found a permanent job online. It was paying $1,500 a month, and when I got that, I was delighted. This was everything I needed to be able to stay in the Philippines without worrying. Granted, I should have been doing it from our house instead of a rented place, but I started that job and my wife started to be happier again, and life was good. Even after everything that happened with the house, life was good. I had about $40,000 in savings left, and after I'd done that job for approximately 6 months, everything was going well. I missed having our own place. That was when we decided to buy somewhere in Angeles City, just a small condominium unit. I bought it in her name because that made it easier, and the fact that we had our own place felt so much better. We moved in, decorated it in the way we wanted. It was only 1 bedroom, and in the bedroom I had to have the office where I worked, but I set it up exactly like I wanted it, and I was running low in terms of money, but I was making $1,500 a month, and we didn't spend that much money, so we could save money at the same time. The unthinkable happened 3 months after we moved in. I lost that job. I thought that job was going to last for years. That job was my ticket to the Philippines, and that job was why I just purchased us a place to live in Angeles City. The 3 months after we've moved in, I'd saved about $700 a month, and then I was starting to picture building that up over the next few years to a nice little nest egg. And then the job was done. It was as if the Philippines was trying to tell me, you might like it here, you might want to be in this place, but we're going to make it as difficult as possible for you, and you've got to earn it. I built a house, issues with the land, bought a condo, then I lost the job I was doing, and now I had about $3,000 total, and I desperately applied for every single job I could find. 3 months and the money would run out. So it was a now or never kind of deal, and I spent hours and hours trying to find more work online. I got things now and then, but nothing that was stable and ongoing. I might make 500 in 1 month, 200 in another, and 1,000 in another. But what that meant was that the 3,000 was going down gradually. I was trying my absolute best, but there was a time when, if I only had enough for a plane ticket to go home, that's what I would need to do. I would need to go home and work and come back, but I wanted to work in the Philippines and make it work there and build up savings. No matter how hard I tried, I just couldn't make enough money to live there. And when it became apparent that this was going to be the case, I didn't know what to do. I couldn't just take my wife back to the States with me because of the visa restrictions. That was a difficult moment. All those people moving illegally to the States, crossing the border who shouldn't be there. All those thousands of people born in the States, probably millions, should I say, who were born to people who were there illegally. Yet here I was, a bona fide American citizen, married to somebody from the Philippines, and I simply wasn't allowed to just take her there. That was difficult and made me feel extremely annoyed about my own country. I didn't think I would ever get to that point where I'd want her to go to the States. If I did, I could have had that as an emergency backup. Let's get the visa for her, and if something goes wrong, it'll be ready to go. But I didn't do that, so I had to leave the Philippines, and she had to stay there. The most difficult thing was that because I didn't have any money, I would need to go back to work. I did not have any money to give her for living expenses for a few months. She only needed a few $100s just to tide things over until I could get back on my feet in the States. So we both had to sit down and agree that she would need to go back and work in the bar for a few months until I could get things together. That was the worst thing for me, knowing that she was going to work there again and I couldn't do anything about it. But I reasoned with myself that at least she had the condo to live in, which was a nice place. Arriving back in the States was the worst feeling in the world. I didn't have anywhere to stay. I was lucky that a friend let me stay at his place, and I was able to get a job very quickly. But when I called my wife, she told me that she'd been working and she didn't feel the same way about me anymore, because she went back to working there. I told her it was just a little bit of time and I'm able to help now, but she just told me she doesn't want anything more to do with me anymore. She told me she hated me. Yet when I left, I thought everything was good, albeit making the best out of a very bad situation. So that was it then. No longer with my wife, back in the States, working another job I hate, a condo in the Philippines that belongs to my wife, but I do have a claim to half of it because we're married. I've already sought advice, and that's it. I've been back in the States now for just over a year, and I tried to call my wife every now and then, but she never answers. I send her messages, but she never responds. I still hold out hope that I will be able to go back and be together with her one day, yet I don't think it's very likely to happen. If we didn't have any problem with the land, we'd still be living there, and I could have made things work online. If I didn't lose that job, we could still be living in the condo and be putting away money every month. But I took a gamble with the condo, which meant that I had a small amount of money left. It also meant that I needed that job to last for a few years, just to give me enough savings for any eventuality which came along. It didn't work though. I failed, and I want to be in the Philippines so badly. I just don't know how I'm going to go there again.